welcome to the November 27th, 2023 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. We are doing this as a hybrid meeting, so the first step is to at least find out if our brand new associate member, Andrea Brezhny, can hear us and we can hear her. Andrea, you're muted. Hello?
I see that she's on, but she might not.
Hello?
I can see your chat, but I can't hear you guys, so I'm trying to fix that.
Natalia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well,
She's here.
Andrea is not going to be eligible on any of the things that we're doing tonight.
She just put in chat that she can hear us now.
Ah, okay. Let me hear you.
Hi, sorry about that.
Okay, and you can hear us.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Zoom is a positive, I think. It's definitely a positive when I'm at home.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing on our agenda, as always, is public input. If anyone is here and would like to talk to us about something that's within our responsibility, that's not on tonight's agenda, this is the time you get a chance. Is there anybody in the room? Is there anybody on the wire?
Nobody in the chat.
Apparently not. We move on to action items. A&R 2021-17, 51 Browns Road.
Just a point of order, that's A&R 2023-17.
Well,
You said 2021. That's the 2023.
2023-17.
I'm just going to.
What do we know?
So this application, and I am not, actually, I do believe that there should be, somebody here this evening to speak on behalf of this, yeah. Hi, how are you? I'll just do a brief introduction for the board and then you can feel free to speak if you'd like. So this is a pretty straightforward, application, 51, Browns Road. I'm just going to go to the plans. Okay, so they are dividing the lot into lots 1 and 2. Both meet access area and frontage requirements. I did exchange a little bit of back and forth with Mr. Jarvis with some administrative things that I wanted called out, setbacks, some more additional language so it was clear for the board. A lot of minor things, moving the arrow on the locus map, super minor. I did not have any other glaring concerns about with this, and it's a pretty straightforward A&R, all things considered, but happy to answer any questions that the board may have, and also if the applicant would like to speak, feel free to come up.
So now we have a plan in hand that reflects your
Correct. Yep.
requests.
Yep.
You can talk to us if you like, you don't have to.
So basically it's
You need to come down to the, either that mic or these mics.
Just
Need
keep it
anything
on
from
my-
us, sir?
Name and address.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and name and address.
My name's Jonathan H.U. Current address 181 Wheelock Ave, Millbury. I will be at what I assume will be 53 Browns Road when I'm done. I don't know what that'll look like, but that's the next number. Just building a single family house on my family's land. That's it. Nothing too
Okay.
exciting.
Anybody? Do you have anything more?
Nope.
All right. I move that the board finds approval is not required and directs staff to do the appropriate documentation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. Since we don't need a vote from out on Zoom land, we can just say all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. You know, the last time.
Thank you.
So I'll sign that paperwork and we'll get in touch with you to pick it up. Great.
Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
All right. The next item is our schedule for the coming year. That was distributed, I think, for a couple of tries to get it out properly. The first thing I noticed is we meet in December 11th, I think, and then it's a month before we meet again. That's, normally it's 2, and 4 times a year it's 3 weeks.
You're
Between
meaning this
meetings.
December to January, is that correct? You're meaning this December 11th until January?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Until
Yeah.
January 8th,
yes.
which is interesting, but we're not gonna meet on January 1st, and we're not gonna meet on December 25th.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kinda narrows the options down.
That happens occasionally. It's rare, but it does happen.
If there is something time pressing, we can always,
Well-
with staff and the chair, kind of coordinate a different day of the week meeting if we need to.
Yeah, the one place that usually comes up, or can come up, is on an A&R, because there's a 20-day opportunity to,
Yeah,
to
21.
take action. So, are we, you wanna vote?
I'll move that the board approve the proposed 2024 meeting schedule.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Any thoughts, Andrea?
No, thank you.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Bills.
No bills.
Did we have some bills?
We do not have bills. No.
No bills.
No bills.
Minutes?
No minutes.
No minutes. Staff report.
Yes. So, it has been busy, as it always is. Unfortunately, some of the longer range planning projects have had to do a reprioritization. But we did manage to approve that our housing production plan during our joint meeting with the select board. I am working with the TEA's office to get that paperwork in order and sent off to the state by next week. I have been working with John Allen and the EDC on their survey, which has been great, and super great survey, great feedback, and there'll be an upcoming event that will be held with the assistance of CMRPC on January 24th. So we're working together to coordinate those logistics and focus on, hearing what business owners in Grafton have to say and how we can improve our economic development climate to better support business owners. We have been able to re-engage with Comtract for the Wi-Fi hotspots that had to fall to the wayside. I was with the assistance of John Allen, we were able to reconnect. So we'll have a upcoming meeting to work out those logistics. There was a question about procurement and having to go out to bid for the services, but we have an ongoing contract with Comtract. So we're fine from that perspective. So that's moving along. Myself and the emergency, the Grafton Emergency Management Coordinator, Kathy Cedarberg, worked together. Even though Kathy really did the lion's share of the work, fair dues to her, to get a statement of interest in for a BRIC grant, which is a building resilient infrastructure, and I'm forgetting what the last one is, but we tried to coordinate on that with DPW. So we're going to the DPW staff had applied for a different grant for culvert improvement on Merriam Road. They did not get that back in March, so we decided to put in a statement of interest for this, and we have a meeting next week with. Oh no, I'm sorry, we have a meeting this week with the state and ourselves. So we're hoping that we'll be able to move forward and get some funds there for that effort. I have been trying to be a lot more regimented about construction compliance and getting out there, and we obviously work with Graves Engineering very closely, who does a lot of the site visits, but I'm trying to just set up a better management and tracking system for myself. So I've been working with Graves on that. And yeah, other than that, it's been really planning board specific business. So hoping that, we'll be able to, once we have a little bit more time and we're less busy, we'll be able to get back into some of the other things that have been put to the wayside. For example, our MS4 work for the subdivision regulations. That's always in the back of my mind. But yeah, happy to answer any questions about anything specific, or if if you want me to focus on something, let me know.
Contract, they have an ongoing maintenance contract.
Right.
But I seem to remember something about, state bid list also that might, if it was needed, that could also fit into the qualification. I'm sure that you folks are.
Yeah,
Covering
I'm
that
working
base.
with William, our procurement officer, to just make sure that we're complying with all, everything 30B, and I think that because of our existing situation with Comchat, we're able to do it this way and streamline that process, which is very helpful. So we're hoping to get those Wi-Fi hotspots set up through our ARPA funds early 2024.
And the other thing, you mentioned a culvert project on Miriam Road. Curious where,
It is on. Let me pull up
just
that,
roughly.
because there was two potential areas floated. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull up that email from Paul. It's the culvert between North and Meadowbrook.
Oh, up at the north end.
Yep.
Well, up at the west end.
Yes.
whatever.
Yes. So yeah, we're looking
Up at the
forward
top
to
of the hill,
right.
more or, okay,
So that'll
yeah.
be exciting.
okay. That's good. Anybody else?
If I may, I just want to amplify and spotlight on what Fiona was talking about, the survey from the Economic Development Council. I think it's been a long time since such a survey has been sent out. The EDC is eagerly waiting to hear from all our business owners and potential business owners in town. What's going well, what's not going well, what can we do to improve. And so it should be out by the week of December 4th. That's when we are planning to send it out.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, we're very excited.
And primarily since we have more time to waste before our public hearings, has there been any permits pulled for 244 Worcester for the warehouse project? I know they were doing borings like 2 weeks ago, but I wasn't sure if there's anything more since then that you know of.
No, not that I know.
I thought I heard that they didn't have, I don't know, that wasn't necessarily getting ready to build. I had the impression maybe that was getting additional
Yeah,
support for anyone who might be interested.
that was my guess as well, but I figured I would
You know,
ask.
it's more of a guess, but I had a little conversation when we were here.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
And
nothing.
The old DPW site, the Upton Street, any movement on that?
So there hasn't been any filings or recent communication with GSX. The last that the planning department heard was that there was some contamination found on the site. So I believe that the GSX is working to coordinate with the TA's office for that cleanup. And I'm not sure if they found a tank in one portion of the site, and I'm not. I'll need to get an update and ask if they're checking the remainder of the site as well, because the likelihood that there's contamination in other portions of the site is probably high, considering the history.
I might have mentioned before, but, some years ago, there was a whole big thing there when that was a going operation. There had been buried tanks,
Right.
and towards the back of the main area where the DPW building is. And that got, gone over the way they do, pretty carefully. So that's why I was wondering, and there was some conversation about, this might have been on the other portion down by or up by the barn.
Barn, yeah.
That was the Forest Association?
At one time, we were calling it the forestry barn.
The forestry barn. Yeah, and, I don't know. I know that there were concerns across the street where the library is, because there'd been a gas station over there.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough site. I know that they were speaking to Concom fairly recently and figuring out wetland replication as well. I think that their primary focus is on the cleanup and the Concom piece before they come back to planning board. 'Cause they'll need those ducks in a row before they talk to us. But yeah, it's a complex site.
Just thought, I should have done this when we started, but when we start the hearings at 7:30, we have 3 of the hearings, the applicants have requested continuations. So if you're sitting around waiting for any of those, we'd like to let you know as soon as we can. That's the, see if I can get this right, the Indian Path, right, 20 Indian Path, tower, or wireless facility, 61 Maple Avenue project, and the site plan approval at 7 Main Street. All of those will be voting on requests for continuation at 7:30. So if anybody's here for those, might save a few minutes. Okay, correspondence.
Thanks. Yeah.
Nothing caught my eye.
Nothing? Nothing. Okay, that brings us to reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC.
I gave my report.
Yep.
Just added on to what Fiona said, so EDC is the only one I'm actively involved in now.
And
Anybody else?
the only thing I could think of, I don't remember if we talked about it here, is it was reported at one of the recent CPC meetings that the 95 North Street project the bids are coming in severely over budget. So they were working on identifying how they might rescope it, or how they might either supplement the budget or figure something out to, to find the next steps for that. That's the park that we approved at town meeting at. I might have the address wrong, but that's the park we approved at town meeting.
Too bad. There's a lot of that going on.
I can work with, see if there's grants and
Yeah,
with Leah and.
my understanding is the rec director is fully aware and has been actively working on it.
Oh, okay.
I've not been, hands in to the
Okay.
details, but that's what I heard.
Touch base with him, definitely. See if he needs any.
You seem to know how to look for grants, though. There seem to be a lot more out there to be looked for than back in the day.
I have done a lot of grants in my day.
Anybody else?
Yeah, not on the current agenda item, but going back to the staff report for just a moment. Following up on town meeting, there's 2 sets of paperwork that went in. We're going to the state. I assume those have gone in, and for the 40R and for the MBTA zoning.
So that we are currently waiting for the town clerk to finish what she needs to, and then we'll submit that application package. So I think she has until the end of this week to get her ducks in a row, but we've been talking to Candy and we are ready to submit once she gets the final
Right,
stamp.
we're as far along as we can be at this point with those.
Right, exactly.
And then the ball goes into the state's court, and
Yep.
they respond whenever they respond.
Yes, they'll let us know when they're ready. So,
No.
I see Natalia.
And I just caught up with, I guess, some part of the world knows perfectly well, but a lot of the world didn't know that the AG finally approved the zoning article we did in the spring
Yep.
to do with, well, basically, Holden Farms is what brought it to us.
Accessory.
It's interesting, there's, I'm not sure whether it made it into our correspondence, but the AG's letter, I thought was very interesting, and we should keep it at hand, or keep it available, because it talks about things like spot zoning, and, the things that we never have much of an answer, we worry about, we think about when we're doing zoning, but this is a little more directed input.
Yep, no, those are good. Those are handy to keep around. I know in our, not to veer too far off the topic, but we're not under a time constraint quite yet. But when we're doing the general bylaw review, I went back through basically all of the fairly recent AG approval letters for the general bylaws. I found several items in there that merited further consideration and resulted in some additional tweaks to the bylaws.
Yeah.
And back in October, we did amend the marijuana section of the zoning bylaw in response to the AG's comments.
Right.
So, though it can be interesting to read through if you really want to spend a lot of time, on the state website, the AG has a municipal law unit, a decision lookup. You could read the decisions for all the decisions that they've issued.
It is very handy. It is for us planning nerds, Dave and I. We do enjoy it. But yes, no, I am definitely eager to get that submission in for our MBTA communities district compliance application. We have all of our pieces ready to go. We just want to make sure that we, don't want to put too much pressure. I know that town clerk has been swamped, so.
Right. Just following up on the October town meeting, the town clerk has
Oh yeah.
40 plus articles to prepare for AG review.
Right. Yes. No. She's got to work it over.
It's a jobs program.
Probably close to 50.
Yeah.
It's your jobs program for the AG.
Yeah.
Natalia's hand.
Yep,
Natalia's hand is up.
There was a hand.
Natalia's
just
hand
wanted
is up
to-
in a
Oh,
while.
Natalia, go.
I just wanted to add that last week, the town clerk's office filed with the AG's office
On,
regarding the articles from this last town meeting.
okay, good.
So at the end of last week, like Wednesday, I think it was.
And I didn't realize that unless they grant themselves more time, they have a deadline.
Yeah,
I like that system.
I think the deadline is roughly 30 days after town meeting.
Really?
Maybe it's 60. It's either 30 or 60.
Yeah, I believe it's 30.
I think it's 30.
I think it's 30.
Within 30 days, the town can request an extension. But normally, all the paperwork has to go in 30 days after town meeting.
Right, well, but the AG, asked the AG for an extension.
Yeah, the AG normally has 90 days.
Yeah.
And in some cases, the AG in the town can negotiate additional time, which was the case for the agricultural accessory use.
We're vamping here and we still have 2 minutes. There must be something. Oh dear. Well,
Well, we need to start planning for zoning articles for the Maytown meeting.
Yes, definitely. There's already a list of of things that have been added. So,
Yeah.
yeah, wireless being
And we've had
one
a
of
few,
them.
a few things besides, MS4.
Yeah.
A couple of things besides MS4 that are coming up for some attention in the subdivision rules.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a little bit easier of a process because we won't need to go to town meeting for
Right,
that.
yeah,
but-
we don't have hard deadlines for that, but,
Right.
you know, all the timing requirements for going to the May town meeting, we, within a couple of months, we need to have a pretty good idea what we're gonna do.
Yep, yep. And there's a lot of great suggestions in our new housing production plan, which is definitely something that we'd like to focus on. There's some great zoning recommendations and goals. So,
Maybe we can use a couple minutes, let people who are gonna talk about the first one we'll actually have talk on, which is 58 Follette Street. They could get into position if they want to, if they have anything to put up or come sit or whatever. Or not.
Seems so crowded today. I said, seems so crowded today. Everybody's here. This is great.
Well, actually, 5 on the 6, we
5 or 6.
just, I said it just momentarily, but I think we're all very pleased that we now have an associate. It's been quite a while without an associate. Very, very thankful to found someone who is interested, willing and able.
That's excellent. I said, that's excellent.
Yes,
Good.
I thought so, when the word came through. Okay. "45 seconds.
Mr. Chair, did we finish with the updates for representatives?
There didn't seem to be anybody fighting for us
Oh, okay.
I
opportunity.
think we finished.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah,
Other way
and
we could kill a minute.
the one committee on which I am the board's representative has nothing to report.
Thank you for your report. 30 seconds. No, 12 seconds. Okay. It being 7:30, we can reopen our public hearings. The first one on the agenda is 5A, 20 Indian Path. We have a request to continue until,
Mr. Chair, real quick, I'm just gonna recuse myself for just this.
oh
part of it.
yes, okay. Good.
20 Indian Path. I move that the board grant the applicants a written request to continue this hearing to December 11th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Now I'll jump down to 5C, which is 61 Maple Avenue.
I'll move that the board grant the applicants a written request to continue this hearing to Monday, January 8th, 2024 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Now I'll jump to 5E, which is site plan and special permit for 7 Main Street.
Move that the board grant the applicants a written request to continue this hearing to Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted unanimously. Which now brings us to the hearing continuation for 58 Follette Street, Selco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless.
So I'll just do a brief overview. So since the last meeting a couple of weeks ago, we've had some outstanding things that we needed to resolve, or at least try and get some opinions on. It looks from the last time we did have a meeting, we had a couple of exhibits uploaded that I wanted to just make sure that the board saw. Between the 13th and the 24th, we've had 2 public comments, a continuance request, obviously, and then a letter from Mr. Moody, who is the counsel for the landowner. Then we had another public comment from Mr. Ray, and then a letter from the applicant's counsel, who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant, to discuss some of these outstanding legal questions that we've had. So I was able to touch base with, we've had a little bit of a challenge with our town council. As the board knows, our council we had left, and she's in the process of bringing up to speed our current folks who are Harrington Heap. So after the chapter land issue, from speaking to Ginny, our former council, and our new council, as discussed in the letter, which Exhibit 38, which I'll pull up, this special permit process does not have, those two issues are coterminous, so it cannot really affect this special permit process. What we can do is we can make sure that the chapter land issue is resolved before, for example, a building permit is issued in our conditions in our decision. So that was the final consensus that we're able to get on that, which we had discussed and is mentioned in this letter. In addition to that, there was a question about prohibition of service, and correct me if I'm wrong, the ability to make a decision if the coverage isn't as sufficient in Grafton versus elsewhere. That question, I was able to get some consensus on, but I would leave it to the experts to weigh in once I'm done giving an overview. If there is, an alternate site that is available that provides more sufficient coverage, it's the board's, prerogative to request more information and ask those appropriate questions. A determination will ultimately need to be made based on the way our bylaw is written, and what's within the powers of the board. So, if the alternate site is available and can be taken advantage of, and there's no issues with the land, titling issues, etc., and it's a viable option, I would recommend that, we discuss what the site limitations are in depth this evening, which is talked about in this letter as well, but I think, the board should definitely examine that further. We did not get anything in writing from council in response, so which I did try and press for. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that, but I'm more than happy to keep pressing to get something as part of the record. So I apologize for not having that. I did work to do that, but again, with everything that's going on, it was challenging. And with that, I think we would also like to focus this evening on the applicant's response to Mr. Maxon's peer review. So, I don't want to keep taking up the floor, but yeah, if we could probably focus on that as well as Mr. Robinson and Cole's letter. I think that would be the best place to start, and then a game plan established from there.
You want me to start? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members and planner. Michael Gimo from Robinson & Cole for the applicant Selco Partnership. As was mentioned, I did send a letter to the board trying to address in pretty summary fashion some of the issues that came up at the hearing last week. One of them concerned the site location relative to the ridge, which there was some discussion about, and our engineer, Mr. Moreno, provided a graphic on that. It shows the topography of the site. It shows that the tower site is not on the ridge line. It's behind the ridge. It's actually on the back side of the hill from Mr. Ray's side and from most of Grafton. And it was sited also downslope, so not directly behind the peak as well. And the reason it needs to be at a location like that, it needs to be able to at least see over the top of the peak to hand off signals and transmit its signals north of the hill. So there's a shadow beyond the hill, we know, where it doesn't provide service. If it was lower, that shadow would be much bigger and it wouldn't accomplish the coverage objectives. So we had done a winnowing process on the height. If you remember, previously the application was for a tower that was 15 feet higher, and we did reduce the size of that tower. We also addressed 21 Follette Street. There's a couple of questions about that. One is just the technical issue, which Mr. Valenti's here and has read Mr. Maxon's report, and he can provide some thoughts on the extent to which that, from a technical standpoint, provides the coverage that Verizon needs. But there's also a lot of site constraints on that site. It doesn't look like it's a feasible site from the standpoint of land use and environmental protection. That's a protected site. It's listed on the town's Article 97 inventory, as well as having wetlands, floodplain, floodway, a Zone 1 water supply well, a large area that's been taken up by a solar project, riverfront setbacks from two rivers, a brook and the river, and the entire area is regulated by Mass Fish and Wildlife under the Endangered Species Program. So that there's a lot of site constraints. It's not a site that really is feasible. We've also talked to you about the elevation issue with that site. It's low. A tower would have to be high to provide the coverage that's needed. A high tower would probably be visible from Mr. Ray's house and others along Follette Street because it would stick up over those trees. The site we've proposed is a better site from all those standpoints. There are no site constraints like that. We've been approved by Concom for a very short crossing section that had to be done on the road. There's no other real issues. It's not habitat. It's not in the flood zone. It doesn't have any of those issues that are presented by this 21 Follette Street. I can understand the board's desire to have the town, receive a revenue stream from a tower site, but this is not really a practical site from that standpoint. And that's why when there had been previous efforts by the town to put out an RFP, Verizon was not responsive to that because it really didn't fit their needs, and it also just is not practical from a development standpoint. I'd like to ask if Keith Valenti could come up now and address some of the technical issues that were in Mr. Maxon's report, and just talk from a technical standpoint about the service that's needed and how that could be provided, and address some of Mr. Maxon's comments about potential alternative plans.
Good evening, Keith Valenti with C-Squared Systems. So in regards to the 21 Follette Street location, I don't know if we have the topographical map that we brought up during the last meeting, but I think the topography says it all. The site's located roughly 180 feet lower in elevation. It's about 3,000 feet to the east of the proposed site. And effectively the area that it would cover is more or less cut in half. It's constrained by the surrounding hills. And I think the isotrope report tends to concur with that summary. Within Grafton itself, it is largely duplicative with what the proposed site does cover. The key areas that I noticed that would suffer would be to the north along Millbury Street, and to the south along Main Street. Conversely, when anytime you move a site 3,000 feet, you're going to have pros and cons. That site location would have a benefit on roads such as Fitzpatrick Road. But on the balance, in my opinion, the proposed site would do better within Grafton, as well as an expansive area into the gaps that extend outside of Grafton as well.
Mr. Chairman, you're looking at me.
Well, they're talking about what you had to say. Maybe you can comment.
Sure. David Maxon with Isotrope, working for the board on this matter. I largely don't disagree with Mr. Vellante. The site that they proposed is much better from Verizon's perspective and from a coverage perspective. I think it's different, and perhaps with respect to Millbury Street, slightly better, the proposed site is, than the potential alternative at the 21 Follett. And that's all well and good. Of course, if you're on top of the hill, you're going to have a commanding view 360 degrees with your signal and be able to provide service in Millbury, in Sutton, as well as in Grafton. And in fact, they're using 4 sectors because it covers so much area that 3 sectors would not provide enough capacity to serve all the people that it can reach, which gives you an impression of just how large the service area of this proposed tower is. And that's a great thing when you want to reduce the number of towers and those sorts of things. As far as the buildability issues, I did not go into depth on looking for a spot on 21 Follett. I just assumed that because there was a kind of utility sorts of development on the property already, that it wouldn't be too hard to find 2,500 square feet to fit a cell tower. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the visual impact from that location is unknown. It's not something that is evaluated in this proceeding. So you'd have to go on your own sort of understanding of the lay of the land in that area and the screening from the existing woods and vegetation. I also want to point out one of the difficulties that a board has in getting facts on the record. And I bring up my experience with the town of Leicester, Massachusetts, where C Squared Systems, acting as the consultant representing the applicant before the town of Leicester in a zoning hearing for a new cell tower, C Squared Systems insisted that the alternatives were no good. When it went to federal court because the board denied the application, it surfaced in discovery that in fact conversations between C Squared Systems and Verizon's engineers, whom we don't get to talk to, Verizon's engineers indicated that they would reluctantly accept the alternative, but really wanted the proposal to be pushed to the brink. So what we have here is Mr. Vellante has made a reasoned argument for why their proposal is so much better from a coverage perspective, and probably a tower count perspective in the larger area, and there's no question about that. So I would just, I think, refer to something that your planner had pointed out, which is you have a bylaw, you have requirements for and sort of general things that you're looking at as to whether or not a particular proposal will be acceptable or not, and that's it. As I've made very clear, I am not an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice. In my experience with other boards, hundreds of other hearings that I've been involved in over the decades, some boards go to the trouble of evaluating alternatives and deciding whether or not they think there's a significant gap and deciding whether to grant approval under the cover of the federal umbrella because they don't think they can grant approval under the bylaw. Other boards that I've dealt with have said, we're not going to touch that. Either this passes or fails. And it's up to the board to decide, with the advice of counsel, how far it wants to go into the federal question. So this whole discussion of alternatives and visual impacts and those sorts of things, coverage of the alternative, is only triggered if the board is not inclined to approve the proposed facility under the bylaw. So I make that point because I don't want it to sound like I'm advocating for approval or denial of the proposed facility, because I'm not. That's your job. But if it's inclined towards a denial, you have evidence on the record, you have what the applicant has described as the need, and its reasoning for why the alternative at 21 Follett is not effective. And then you have the information that I've given you, and you have the local knowledge of the lay of the land and that sort of thing to assess whether you want to go down the road of the federal question simultaneously or after you go down the road of the bylaw question, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I wish we had our council, and our council was ready to jump into this. I for one, am just really bothered. The spirit of our bylaw has been to have the towers have as little impact as possible on the town, and for the generally we've been able to keep them pretty much below the ridge lines the top of the tower below the ridge line as you view the long views in town. That's been pretty successful. Either that or they're in areas where there really aren't views that have been a problem. I guess I'd like to understand how the federal law works. If you build a 1,000-foot tower, you could probably cover a whole lot of country. And if you built a 50-foot tower, you could only cover a fairly small area. When do you get to the point where you can say more towers, shorter, is what we want, and we don't have to let them build the big tower? It bothers me that we have this, well, certainly the biggest tower, the tower in terms of amount of service that's come to Grafton. Yeah, the ridge line, it isn't where the base of the tower is, it's where the top of the tower is. And where the top of the tower is going to be after the add-ons to it that we won't have any say-so about. I'd really like to know, well, first of all, if it could make a difference to better understand the second site, and its prospects, then being able to look into it and actually documenting, for example, whether there's buildable area and what constraints there are and whatnot, seem to be a necessary part of it. I think we have impressions, but no really looking at it.
So, for one thing, particularly the letter that was just received today with a lot of useful information, in particular some of the evaluation of the 21 Follett Street site. Having just received that today, I'm not prepared to make any decisions based upon that. So I think in any case, between that and some of the other questions we have that for which we would appreciate some advice from council, I think we'll want to take some time to digest all of this. I don't know, although I read through the information on the Follett Street site, haven't had enough time to think about it to, sort of, I think in consideration of that potential alternative, granted that the tower would be higher and the coverage area would be less, but contrast that with the rather prominent visibility of the proposal from one side of Lazy Hill. That it would be helpful to get a better, an even better sense of what we can look at, how we want to think about that. It's unfortunately not practical at this point, but I recall in a previous iteration of this hearing that the applicant had contacted a landowner on the other side, the northeast side of Lazy Hill, where if that site had been available, the desired coverage could have been achieved with a significantly lower tower. It would have been nice if you were able to do that, but we know that's just, you tried and you couldn't get an agreement with the appropriate landowners. So that's, while that would be sort of an ideal solution here, that's not on the table. We're really faced with, I think, the choice between the proposed location and the one alternative that's been sort of continually identified but not yet thoroughly evaluated, which would be something around 21 Follett. And yes, there are issues there. And I can't speak to, I don't know how I would end up evaluating that in consideration of whether to approve the proposed locations. I'm not there yet, one way or the other. I can't get past the fact that the proposed location is a rather, although from only one angle, basically, it is highly visible. And there's just no way around that. It may end up being the best available alternative, all things considered, but I'm not at a point where I know which way I would want to go on that.
Yeah,
I think it is helpful to have the applicant's perspective on the additional information they've provided us on 21 Follett. That's helpful, and ultimately I think that will help me in reaching a conclusion for whatever it turns out to be worth.
Yeah. So that's basically one of my two major problems with this, mentally for myself, which is, the visibility from from that one direction on this proposed site. At the same, thinking about that on the other hand, though, I'm expecting that at any location on Follett Street would be much more visible from a much wider portion of the town. That's my impression knowing the area, but without a balloon test we can't know for sure, from a particular spot as it's mentioned. The other thing I have a concern about was the overall applicability of this of this application to us because of the site issues. But as you've mentioned a few weeks now, and in your letter, and more importantly to me, our own town council, council has said basically that's not thing I can use for a determination on our end at all. You know, it's a concern, but it's nothing that's going to going to my vote. But that was just the thing I'm still, you know. So I would like to see that in writing, but at this point, we'll go from there.
As to, is there any reason, or what's the reason for looking elsewhere? Two reasons maybe. One is there is an unusual amount of objection to this location. And our bylaw is fashioned around making a broad decision based on how well it fits with the vision of the town. Actually, I suppose that's both of what I was going to say. This bylaw was upheld on a denial based on a lower tower, but based on proximity to important views and whatnot. At one time, there was a proposal to put a tower at what we call the old DPW barn near the center of town. And that was denied because of basically similar arguments. And of course, that went on quite a while. Ended up in federal court with a summary decision in the town's favor, supporting some of this point of view about what our bylaw asks for. Being a special permit, we have to make value judgments. It isn't black and white. And I think, if I recall, this particular location scores not real well under a number of the considerations that are listed in the bylaw. So makes it very difficult. Anybody else?
I mean, to that point, Mr. Chairman, I don't think I don't even think the wellhead site would score any better from that standpoint in terms of zoning, in terms of environmental impacts. I think you know, those are probably on a, you know, to the extent that you're concerned with views and ridges and so forth, those are probably for different reasons on a level issue. The advantage that our proposed site has, other than being a feasible site, is we observe, as Mr. Maxon said in the very first hearing on this, we meet all your setback requirements. We are not looking for you know, setback relief from any of those directions. We did put it on the back side of the hill. The lowered tower height has really eliminated the visual impact from the front side of that hill. On the back side of that hill, I don't think there's a way to eliminate that impact. It's visible from those condos in Sutton. We acknowledge that it would be. And you know, it's admirable that you want to protect this town of Sutton. I would point out that the town of Sutton hasn't been in here objecting to that. And in fact, they voted to let us apply for this special permit by carving out that piece of land from their special permit condition. So, you know, from a planning standpoint, Sutton has not been negative about this for visibility or any other reason. But what they did, I think, ask you, their sole comment was to make sure that the landowner put that land in a conservation restriction, which the landowner does intend to do. The surrounding property, not the piece that's carved out. So you know, I acknowledge everything you're saying. You have a very comprehensive bylaw. I think we meet the spirit of your bylaw. I think we meet the letter of your bylaw. Admittedly, from a lower preference tier, but there are no higher preference tier sites that can provide the service that Verizon needs in that part of town. You have a town that's zoned in a way that the land that would be needed to cover this area is in those lower preference areas.
Without, you know, you have your opinion about whether this alternate site would be viable. he has, he had an opinion. What we need is some facts, to be able to really evaluate that. I haven't tried to get down to that level myself. I'm an engineer, but it's electrical. I don't know. And I don't know that I have the resources to check all of the wetlands and all of that. But given the difficulty we have on this one, it might be really valuable to actually get some facts, get some real evaluation of the possibility for that site. Obviously, it depends on how high you build the tower in any of the locations.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in some situations, we've seen applicants express a willingness to consider an alternative because they think it might work. In this case, we don't have that. The applicant has expressed very clearly that they don't think it will work, and they've given you a barrage of reasoning, some of it having to do with the site development, some of it having to do with the coverage. So I'm not sure how much benefit there will be to attempt to gather more facts on whether that site will work, because the applicant is still going to say, no, it won't work. And that's why I've suggested that if you just focus on the bylaw and whether or not this site meets the town's standards first, and make a decision as if there was no federal law, and then decide what to do if there's a denial in that process, and have advice of counsel on whether you should be going to great lengths to vet alternatives, and how much information should you gather, and all of that sort of thing, whether you should be pursuing that alternative analysis to greater depth or not.
I'm not clear whether that comes after denial and an appeal, or whether that comes now.
Great question.
And there is the problem.
Yeah, and I see boards wrestling with this all the time. In some cases they'll get a sense of the board as to whether the board is likely to approve it just on the bylaw basis, and then get advice of counsel on whether they should go down the road on the alternatives and significant gap analysis and override a potential denial because of the federal, the presence of the federal umbrella over that. And so it becomes sort of a two-step process. But you have to know what the outcome of the first step is to invoke the second step before you do the first step.
Do you think I should poll the board at this point? Is that what you're thinking of?
Well, you're the chair.
Thank you so much. How long have you been coming around? Since that, I think you were around for that DPW.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and some before that, maybe. Well, is there harm in asking the board at this point? All right. How do,
Yeah, I mean, that's assuming there's no other holdups. I do think that there is a lot of coverage that's needed in that area, and as we said, it's likely that there would possibly have to be more than one tower that goes up in that area. So I do recognize some of the abutters' concerns with the project. I do think that given the alternatives, it's probably the optimal solution to have in that area. So assuming there's no other holdups, I'm in favor of moving forward.
okay.
I'm in the same house as what Jim was thinking. Based on the facts presented, it appears to me, and being very cognizant that there are very undesirable visibility issues for the abutters, and I'm not one of them. But based on the facts, if there are no other alternate sites that's available or that can be even proposed as a solution. I'm in favor of this.
I think I am leaning that I would, if the hearing closed today and the council said, you need a vote, and I would lean toward a yes. As I have not completely made up my mind, but I'd say like 80% likely.
Okay, well, up to this point, I have not been thinking in terms of specifically evaluating this proposal with respect to all of the elements of the bylaw. So I haven't yet allowed myself to think about whether I would lean towards approval or denial. So I'm kind of ambiguous about that.
Yeah.
If I had to say something, I think, and again, this is because I've been trying not to think in terms of a final decision on that just yet, still in the mode of gathering information. I might end up slightly leaning towards approval, but I'm not positive about that. Additional thought might tip me in the other direction. Because I say I've not been thinking in quite those terms. So I'm not prepared to commit. Now I would be happy to think more seriously in those terms, and at the next meeting have a stronger opinion. But that's where I am right now.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo that. I haven't looked at, re-looked at every one of our criteria in the bylaw. That's why it's not a.
See, this is the kind of thing because it's just not. It's not really obvious that it's not a no-brainer. Yes, correct. It's not a no-brainer. No, it's something that you really need to review and look more carefully at everything in the bylaw to make sure that I haven't missed a point that's really going to be important in a case like this.
Yes.
Other cases, it's been a lot easier.
Yeah, in this case, obviously we have to look through the whole wireless section in the bylaw. We also have to look at the underlying special permit, 1.5. Whatever it is.
All that.
Which include judgments about compatibility and so on. At this point, I can't be comfortable with an approval at this point. Again, when we get down there, probably have, if it comes to a vote, if it comes to really having to draw the line, I'm going to have to go through 1.5.1a and 1.5 and 12. Whatever they are, go through all of it. And in doing that, I'll be looking at it based on all of the towers we've ever done, because I've been on all of them. And I was on writing the bylaw. So I have a pretty good idea what it's there for and how it's worked. So I think, slight leaning towards approval, but not really clear.
So it sounds to me like kind of following with Mr. Maxon's suggestion here. If we zero in on, given all the information that's been provided to us today, as of today, we can kind of zero in on an assessment. Will this board approve the proposal? If we end up approving it, well, that's all done, like you say. We don't have to. We don't have to dig any deeper into other areas. If we end up deciding to disapprove, that's when we have to start thinking about what next, what comes next. But it sounds to me like, based on what we've all said here, we're pretty close to. We're getting ourselves in a mode of thinking right now. you know, could we approve this proposal? And as some of us have expressed a need to sort of mull that over now, we might be able to come back at the next meeting with a more solid answer on that. And that will tell us where to go from there.
If I may, I think that the best thing to do personally is to engage town council to write a response to Mr. Jaimo's letter and have a final consensus, because I think that it's just not having that legal opinion in the record makes doing your job challenging. So
No, that would definitely be helpful. That's one of, in my thinking prior to tonight's meeting, after looking at that, it's one of the things I thought is, we would definitely find it helpful for council to weigh in on the legal arguments that have been given.
right.
Even to
Yeah.
talk to us.
I would say it might be very helpful, given the complexities of this application, and in particular, to have the written correspondence ahead of our meeting and see if they can join our meeting even via Zoom on the next night this project comes up.
Yes, it definitely wasn't for lack of trying for this evening, I will say. But yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the best move. I mean, the prohibition of service issue, it's still not very clear, and it's a challenging issue, and obviously the board is going to make sure they adhere to the bylaw as closely as possible, but I have concerns of inadvertently having a prohibition of service issue without even realizing it. It's complex, and I think we need an expert legal opinion.
I think that's probably part of my hesitation is that not having enough information that council could provide to help with some of the.
I wonder if we're asking a lot of general counsel, by the way. This is this is a specialty, right?
Right.
Some of this.
Yes, my own experience at federal court is that the judges don't always agree with me either. So,
Surprise, right?
but got another suggestion just to move the ball forward, if I can use a sports metaphor. And that is, what I'm sensing is that there are no hard no's. A number of you are on the fence, but leaning toward a yes if all the ducks are in a row in terms of the way the bylaw calls for them. That perhaps, in addition to getting council's advice on what would happen if there's a denial and what you might do to thresh out the federal question, is to draft an approval with conditions. And you will have in front of you an approval that you can look at and go, no, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, I agree with this, I agree with this. And you'll actually have something concrete to act on as you do in your other hearings with a draft decision.
Yeah. And the one comment, Mr. Chair, that our town administrator told me last week is the new council the town has is a firm. It's not one individual person as a general counsel. So there's a lot of people in this firm that have different specialties that could assist the town on the different areas. I don't know if cell tower situation is one of their specialties, but that's what I've heard.
So I was able to speak with him briefly today, and he did say that he has experience in this type of analysis. He just hasn't had the ability to provide that opinion. So
He does?
He does. Yes.
Okay.
He does.
Okay.
That's knowing that is all the more helpful because
Right.
That's a positive because I can imagine, I've had councils who admitted to not actually knowing all the nitty gritty about some technical, some very particular piece of law, and this is a very particular piece of law.
And I reiterated to him, I said, there's a sense of urgency here. This is what, potentially closing this out very soon, and
Yeah.
we're all cognizant of that. So he's aware.
All that said, before we get to deciding what to do with the hearing tonight. I think we may have people who are interested in this. We don't need to have the same thing said again. We've heard it all, we've read it all. But if you have something new, it's a public hearing. Is there anyone who,
I don't have, I'm in a butter, but I don't have anything new to say, other than I would appreciate that they,
If you come up, say your name and address.
Michael Palermo, 45 Follette Street. I would appreciate that you think like an abutter, because I think that's part of your role, being on this board, is to think like an abutter. You're making the decisions for the town based on all the areas in the entire town. So that's all I have to say.
one of those 1.5.1 considerations is compatibility with other butters and other properties in the area.
But he
Right,
made that comment that he's
but
not
it's actually one of the considerations that we are, we have, that we are actually part of our law. Okay, so, after all that, what do you think?
I think we meet the standards for the bylaw, if that's what you're asking, but,
You,
if
say that again?
I said, I think we meet the standards of the bylaw, if that's what you're asking, but that might not have been what you were asking. Would you like us to, agree to a continuance until the 11th, figuring that we'll wrap it up at that point?
We'll hope, because if we don't make it on the 11th, then it's 4 weeks until the next meeting.
Right.
And a lot of holidays, which won't get any.
I just will say that's doable.
Who's
The
the
11th
new
is
town
doable?
council?
Harrington and Heat.
Okay. Is it somebody particular there or no?
I spoke to him for the first time today. I believe his name is Michael as well. So
Okay. All right. So you want me to fill out?
You could ask her,
is that? Just wanted to make sure that was acceptable.
Well, I think given the fact that you have more information coming in, I think we'll use that opportunity probably to lay out our case with respect to each of the standards again. It's in our application, but
Okay.
a lot has changed, so.
so, do we have that form?
He's working on it right now.
Oh, that's the form he's got.
I will move that the board accept the
grant.
the board grant, I should know that, but now I've been at this for 13 years.
As long as I'm here, it's grand.
Board grant the applicant's request, which the applicant, as we speak, is in the process of writing, to continue this hearing to Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted unanimous. We'll see you again. Now then, okay, that's that.
It is 2023 dash
05.
05. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okey-dokey.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. Moving on to, 5D. Special permit SP 2023-07, site plan approval. Special permit and special, Broadmeadow North, 188 Providence Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Rob Knappich. I'm counsel to the applicant, Broadmeadow Realty. With me is Norman Hill, who you know well, of Land Planning, and also with us this evening is Jay McGill of the applicant. I know you've heard from Norman primarily throughout, and that's appropriate because you're dealing with technical matters. Norman's suffering from a little bit of a sore throat this evening, so I'm pinch hitting for him. But the good news is that hopefully my workload is light. As you may know, you opened the public hearing some time ago. There was technical review on both site matters conducted by Graves Engineering and also technical review focused on traffic issues by your consultant. And the sort of culmination of that occurred just today. We did receive a few, I think it was last week or perhaps a little bit before, a final letter from Graves indicating that all comments were addressed and to at least their satisfaction. That was dated November 22nd. Our traffic engineer wrote a response November 21st, and just today we did receive a 2-page, nice and short and sweet response from your consultant indicating, I think it's fair to say, that all the traffic issues were addressed. So it does seem that from a technical perspective, all matters have been satisfactorily addressed. If you agree with that, we think that it's the board should consider. We ask that you consider closing the public hearing this evening. And as is customarily the case, if there are lingering issues or matters that you feel have not been quite addressed, we would like to think that they could be addressed in the form of conditions to a special permit. We're here to answer any further questions you have or expand upon what's been set forth in writing, but again, in short, we think that the technical matters have been addressed.
Fiona,
Yeah, so
what do you-
I have
what do you think?
I have a quick question. So this TEC's response came in today, obviously. So I just wanted to confirm that that is all checking out. If there's any conversations that were to be had with the fire department about the expanded driveway, which I'm sure won't be an issue, and most of the other issues that were brought up in the traffic study seem to be or will be addressed through the MattDOT permit.
Yes, so the initial comment letter from your consultant raised some issues about some of the functionality of the intersections and safety and so forth, and also raised questions about a sidewalk and things and the like. Our consultant, in his response letter on the 22nd, did address those matters, and for several of them, as you note, he does expand upon what's likely, but says that, well, since the roadway is under the jurisdiction of Mass DOT, and therefore our curb cut onto 122 will require a permit from them, that's a whole review process that's conducted by Mass DOT relating to the safety of the road, whether or not right or left turn lanes are warranted, where a sidewalk should go, and of course, I think it's suggested, of course, we're happy to copy you on that submission to Mass DOT and any correspondence, but I think in summary, there are issues that are within Mass DOT's jurisdiction, and so those are sort of to be resolved. We don't think they'll have an impact on the design such that we'd have to come back to you if this were, approved for an amendment to the special permit. But obviously, if that does occur, then we would.
And we have a well-defined process for dealing with modifications, minor or major, to a special permit. So that's
right.
Yep.
That would be more or less routine.
Yeah.
Something that does.
And just to be ultra specific, my understanding is like if MassDOT says you need 2 separate turn lanes for inside your project, then you'd have to revise the plans and just come first for a minor modification, or the hope that it is a
Yes.
if it is a minor anyway.
MassDOT is only gonna talk about what's within their right of way. They're not gonna talk about the subdivision roads back from there. The impression I got trying to read all this stuff on my troubled computer was, if you feel we have everything we need in order to write a decision with conditions that say, you gotta deal with those things, whatever, there's more than one thing that's come along this can be dealt with as a condition. We wanna be sure that we get all those in a decision draft.
Yeah, I think, there's 2 requests for modifications to the site plans that are in this TEC letter. It's to adjust the width of the driveway and the access drive and to add the, I believe, what was the, pedestrian crossing warning signs. That's not in my opinion, not a significant make or break thing. So I'm happy to condition accordingly, or if we prefer to have the revised plan set with the.
Yeah, that's the question.
It's up to
Do we
you.
wanna revise plans to reflect anything, or our conditions?
Yeah, this comes up fairly frequently. It's something that's essentially minor, and as is fairly typical in cases like this, we have 2 ways we can go from tonight. One, we could close the hearing and work on and have a draft decision for the board's consideration at the next meeting, or leave the hearing open with the expectation of receiving a revised plan set, and and between now and the next meeting, given that we know what we're expecting to receive, it's still feasible to write a draft decision. It's a question of, do we add a condition in the first case, or do we add an exhibit in the second case?
Except that we just talked about this.
Right. We've talked about that, and basically, we came down at the last meeting, this discussion on this topic is saying that if the hearing remains open and the expectation is that that there would be significant changes to a draft decision as a result of new information coming in, we don't want to start a draft decision without all the information, or without knowing what that information is going to be. In recent years, a situation like this where we would be conditioning the decision on a revised plan, it's much the same thing if we keep the hearing open, get the revised plan, and just include that as an exhibit.
Yeah.
So but again, and I would defer to staff too. The staff has to write the decision.
A couple things.
They have a say.
I'd like to talk about process in a moment, but just so we understand, I thought you referred to 2, probably at least 2 conditions arising from the TEC letter. The first one was warning signs, and what was the second one specifically?
The width of the access drive will need to be adjusted. It's 24 feet right now, and it needs to be 30 based on that.
Okay, so that is an issue that we should discuss, because it does have there is some talk about widening the driveway from 24 to 30. It was submitted some time ago, it was 24. We did have a technical review meeting, and we thought we're okay at 24. We still think we're okay at 24 because the turning templates demonstrate that the fire department's largest apparatus can navigate the site unimpeded as designed. So there is a comment about, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a 30-foot wide roadway? And I wish it was as simple as that, but Norman can attest to the fact that it's really not. To go from 24 feet to 30 feet not only has a profound impact on the design and a sort of a ripple effect on drainage and the like, we're not convinced it's a good idea for a couple of reasons. First, again, it creates more impervious area. There's certainly a movement and a philosophy among DEP and environmentally focused people that, narrower roadways produce less runoff. So our roadway is sort of consistent with that. It does function. In addition, I think we can all agree from personal experience that a wider roadway just promotes faster circulation. So we really think the 24 feet is sufficient, perhaps even optimal. So we would ask that the board agree that the 24 feet is sufficient, adequate, and functions as designed. Because if it is I wish it were as simple as just widening it to 30, but again, as Norman can attest, it's really not.
And let me build on that for just a second here. In recent years, the town has been trying to promote low-impact development principles. And part of low-impact development is minimizing pavement. So personally, I'd be happy to stick with 24 feet for that reason.
Can we review where the 30-foot recommendation came from? Whom, why?
Yes, so actually, Mr. Dumais is on the call and representing TEC. And I'm sorry, nope, MDM. Wrong group, sorry. That was my fault.
If
I
may-
will follow up on that. Kevin could not make it this evening. I'm getting my lines crossed between the two.
So given this, is this something we would want to say, let me throw this out as I stick with, issue a decision based on 24 feet?
No.
And if not, I mean, how do we resolve that? Do we keep things open?
We need to, at least I need to look at the strength of the request recommendation for the 30. I mean, you know,
Mr.
that's
Chair.
why we have people give us input.
So the fire department posted their comments in our exhibit number 10, and they wrote, roadways, driveways, parking lots, entrance shall be void of all obstacles to a minimum of 30 feet, i.e. light poles, trees, shrubs, stone walls, gates, and posts, mailboxes, etc. That was what they wrote for 30 feet. It does have an extra bullet point that says should be at least 24 feet wide, preferably 28 feet wide. They did not call out in their letter a 30-foot wide driveway. They called out free of obstruction up to 30 feet.
Right, but it appears that Mr. Dendrade had a conversation with the fire department more recently than when that exhibit was submitted, and the fire department specifically requested it. So
That does not seem to be in our record, though. That's what I was
that's
getting
in
into.
the exhibit 25, which was submitted today. So
Yeah. It does say the fire department requested, but it doesn't make any comment or note on where and when and how they requested it, because their request is not in our record in any way. Well, the 30-foot wide, that letter could have been quickly read and misunderstood as meaning 30 feet wide driveway to my reading and understanding right now.
yeah, I think that's my concern, is that I don't know how it evolved to this finding in the letter, and I just don't want to. If there's something very specific that the fire department has in mind, I would like to be able to follow up on that.
So we need to circle back on that,
Right.
which to me is enough reason to keep the hearing open. Do you feel that you're in a position to get at least most of a decision drafted? Or would you prefer to hold off on that entirely until the next meeting?
Remember our last meeting?
Yes, that's true. I mean, I think that given the crunch, but there's also the added difficulty of the 4-week break between the December meeting and the January meeting. So I'm trying to be cognizant of that as well.
That'll give more time to write a decision.
Yeah.
So there is this one open issue which we cannot resolve tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll take me long to get that answer.
Yeah, but we don't have it.
Right.
And if it's strong enough so that the board wants more than 24 feet, wants something that involves a plan change that says, apparently any plan change in this case would be significant, and we're gonna have more conversation about it. I don't think we should be looking at expecting it to all play out perfectly.
I would agree with that.
I'd like to just point out that the road's 24 feet wide, but you have a 30-foot rounding and a 30-foot rounding. So it ends up 84-foot opening. There are no aerial utilities, everything's underground. So the shoulder is completely clear, there's no poles, no obstructions.
Where do the mailboxes go?
All right.
Is there a picture,
Where do
is
the
there an
street
image
signs
or
go?
drawing?
There's gonna be a mail room in the office.
Okay, come. Name, rank, and serial number.
All right, Jay McGill, 215 McGill Drive. Yeah, there's gonna be a mail room in the maintenance office with the, so that's where the mailboxes will be. They're not gonna be on the side of the road, yeah.
Okay.
They say for package deliveries, with Amazon being so big right now. And even the fire department concurred that, they hate when they walk in a building and see packages all over the lobby. So this will eliminate that.
Well,
I think my basic comments are is if my understanding of the TEC comment is correct, that it came from Exhibit 10, if that's where it came from, then I'm comfortable with the 24-foot wide driveway. And, with the obstructions clear like they had recommended. On the decision point, I think from our discussion at our last meeting, I would not like to ask staff to have a decision ready if we're keeping the hearing open, unless it is extremely trivial. This case is something that's still to be determined and the board's preference to be determined. So that's my overall preference. I do wonder from the applicant's side, I know earlier is always better, but is there any meaningful expectation that if the decision is an extra, few weeks out, that there's going to be any significant, progress halted on your end?
Yeah, probably not. I would offer for what it's worth. I mean, I've appeared before you, as you know, but not enough to really know what your inclinations are. However, in some municipalities, if the applicant offers to produce a first draft based on perhaps a template, then I'm happy to do that. I'm confident it'll save time.
That's,
No.
I don't think in my memory, we've never done that.
I don't think that's, I don't remember the last time that.
You have a sort of proprietary view of these things.
Yeah, well,
Right, we have on occasion offered the applicant an opportunity to review and comment on a draft decision and accepted recommendations. But it's been originated by staff. So it sounds like we want to leave the hearing open because we have an unresolved question about the roadway width. Staff will be contacting the our traffic engineer and the fire department as need be to resolve the open question. And if the board agrees, I would suggest it's up to staff's discretion as to whether or not to bring a draft decision to the next meeting. It depends entirely upon staff's workload and how this question is resolved. Because if it's resolved in a direction that requires a redesign, that's not something we're likely to have completed in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So it's really up to you, Fiona. Depending on how you get these questions answered,
Bob, I
you
had
may
a
or
question
may
once you're
not
done.
be able
once
to
you're done.
produce a draft decision.
It's gonna have to, I'm gonna have to do some background research and then ultimately
Right.
make the decision from there. I don't wanna say it now.
A thought,
Request a continuance.
if you haven't started Mass Highway review,
They won't look.
it's gonna be out there a ways before you can start putting shovels in the ground.
Yeah, they won't look at it until the plan's approved.
Yeah,
They won't look at it until the plan's approved. Yeah.
So can you bring up, Fiona, can you bring up Exhibit 22? I'm curious, when you said 84 feet, I'm just trying to visualize, what do you mean by the 84 feet?
24?
22.
At the entrance, the pavement does that.
The tangent points at the ends of the roundings.
So go out this way 30 feet, go out that way 30 feet.
On
Plus
this
your
one?
24, so
On
that's
this,
84
on this
feet.
image? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
This is for the fire truck to turn around, right?
Yes.
Just trying to see if I
So where are we referring to that in this image? Here.
Where the roundings meet the highway.
There?
It's really hard to see the cursor. Someday we're gonna get big bright cursors for this.
Yes. I'm trying
I've been looking for that ever since we had computers.
I mean, I have a scale
And while she's looking
in
at
my
that,
office, but
you also are before the Conservation Commission for a stormwater and wetlands review.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's not yet
point,
completed.
point to the end of the rounding, there
Okay.
and there.
Okay, and the
That's-
trucks will turn there? Is that what you're saying?
So where it meets 122, it's 84 feet wide.
Okay. But the trucks
I
would
could-
come
I could be
inside, right?
picking and say it's not exactly
Truck
84
would
feet
still
because the
come
road is
inside.
slightly curved at that point.
Stop. Down, boy.
I would prefer not to elaborate on that. You don't want to hear that?
No, I already know it, so I don't need it. Geometry, the only course I ever had that I was good at was engineering drawing.
Trigonometry.
Let's see, is there anybody else here who wants to comment on this hearing? Okay, what are we gonna do?
Request a continuance.
Yeah.
Okay,
You have to.
So we're gonna ask you to continue to whatever you think is the next convenient meeting.
Our next hearing is December 11th. After that, it's January, so
12.
probably want December.
Yes, I would recommend December on the chance that
yeah,
it won't get more
I
complicated.
think,
Fair enough.
I think we'll have a considerably improved opportunity to get it moving.
Okay.
And 4 weeks will give Fiona a little more time to get things written. She came here because we're doing a lot of planning, she told me. Yeah, really good thing,
Busy
doing a
right
lot
now.
of planning. Turns out the we part is her.
All right, so I will move that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue this hearing to Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Moved in second, is there discussion? Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted, unanimous.
Thanks, folks.
Making
Thank
progress.
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Which brings us to 5F. Special permit SP 2023-06, site special permit and site plan approval, 124 Westboro Road. Goodness, real live people.
With us tonight, I'm Josh Swirling. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna do a real brief intro before kicking it over to Josh and Hannah and Haley, who's also on Zoom. I have the draft uploaded to the exhibits. I know that we're probably gonna want to talk about some of the conditions and the way that's drafted. Dan is on the call from MDM to talk through any specific transportation related findings. There, in my opinion, there wasn't anything that we weren't able to address in some form in the draft, but I'll have the applicant and Dan hash that out. And other than that, I was able to get a response from, there was a couple of staff comments that I wanted to follow up on, one being Brian Cizurco, sorry. He was able to get back to me and said, you know, if his original comment regarding the intersection improvements and potential easements, etc., he said he doesn't believe the easements are actually necessary if the board feels the $25,000 contribution is acceptable. That can be deposited into the long-range sidewalk article that's in place for future improvements in that area already. So there's a funding mechanism established for this that I was able to learn about today. So I just wanted to share that with the board. And the fire department, I just double checked with them one last time that the turning radius and the analysis that was done checked out in their opinion, and they said that was fine. So all in all, I have no concerns. I've been tracking the correspondence pretty closely, obviously, because I wrote the decision. So with that, I will just I'll have the applicant speak to their thoughts about the decision. And if you want me to share anything in particular, just let me know and I'll pull it up.
Thank you, Fiona. Sorry I'm not in person this evening, but for the record, Haley Palazzola with Westboro Road Property Owner LLC, care of GFI Partners. I'll just do a quick kind of recap and introduction for our team, and then I'll turn it over to Josh and Courtney to kind of finalize where they are. We appreciate your patience. As you know, we filed our site plan special permit application in June and have been working with the town's third-party peer review consultants to reach what we believe is quote unquote clean peer review sign-offs. We are grateful that Fiona has prepared a draft conditions for your review this evening, and did request if we could just comment on some of the items in the decision. That would be very helpful. Before we do so, I wanted to just turn it over to Josh and Courtney. Josh to speak to kind of the final peer review from Graves Engineering, and then Courtney to summarize her findings in the traffic peer review. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you briefly.
Thank you. Yep. And I think the Graves peer review is very straightforward. Clean bill of health. If there's any questions relative to where we landed with that, I'm happy to answer them. And I know Courtney would be happy to jump into the MDM responses, as well as the traffic mitigation that's proposed. A couple items to clarify in the decision as well, which I think we can hopefully get through. And if there's an opportunity beyond tonight to provide some red line comments, we'd be interested in doing that as well.
So we greatly appreciate MDM's thoughtful comments throughout the public hearing process. As Haley mentioned, we believe, based on the letter that MDM submitted to you today to Fiona, that we've generally addressed all of their comments. Through the peer review process, the applicant has increased significantly their contributions to offsite mitigation, and in lieu of a one-time monetary contribution of $25,000, at MDM's request, we tied that to an actual improvement. So instead of the donation, the applicant is committed to installing or designing and installing a crosswalk at the site driveway across Route 30. What this would allow is employees at the facility to access both travel directions of the WRTA shuttle that passes by. So if they're headed westbound, they can safely cross the street to wait for the westbound shuttle bus. And on either side of the road, for both the WRTA travel directions, there'll be a landing pad that will be designed handicap accessible, as well as a significant on-site sidewalk connecting that crosswalk to the facility. We also have increased the mitigation to include advance warning signage and advance warning beacons to further enhance the crosswalk. As MDM had mentioned in one of their comment letters, there's a reverse S-curve. There is generally adequate sight distance for the regulatory speed limit, but given that motorists are traveling quite a bit above the posted speed limit, in addition to the speed radar assemblies that the applicant had already committed to, they will also add the advance warning beacons. Through the pre-construction process, they will work with the DPW to make sure they're comfortable with the design. But conceptually, we've presented that to the board and to MDM. And one of the other items that has changed was the applicant had previously committed to a speed radar assembly on Institute Road in the northbound travel direction. That's where vehicles are coming over the hill, and then the site driveway is in the middle of the hill across from Adrena Lane, the new subdivision road. In recent weeks, that has been installed by others, so there's no longer a need for this project's applicant to implement that, which is also why they're increasing the mitigation on Route 30. There's other measures that they were willing to do: installation of EV charging stations, bicycle parking on site, and committing to a initial traffic monitoring program. That generally covers the basics. Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want MDM to weigh in or if you have any questions from me, happy to answer anything.
I had one question. So the crosswalk, is that the one, the lighted crosswalk, you, on demand, you press the button and it,
Yes, so we'll have, those are called RFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and those will be placed facing both travel directions within the vicinity of the landing pad. In addition to that, to further enhance safety, given that motorists are traveling at a higher rate of speed than is allowed by law, to warn motorists of the upcoming crosswalk, which will also double as making them aware of, you know, the driveway that's going to be there too, because crosswalks are typically put at an intersection. The applicant is committed to installing the warning beacons. You may be familiar, it would be similar to the one traveling eastbound on Route 30, approaching the Tufts Veterinary School for their crosswalks. It would be MUTCD compliant and MassDOT compliant, even though it's not a MassDOT road, but it'd be similar to that. And we would space them, all the signage and radar signs in appropriate distance so that there's not what we call sign pollution. If there's too much going on, motorists just can't process it all, so we would adequately space them out.
okay, and that would again be triggered, the advanced beacons and stuff, they would be triggered by the crosswalk or?
No,
they are always on?
the ones at the crosswalk would likely be the push button ones. We'll work that out with the DPW, but that's the most recent mechanism that's being used in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The advanced warning beacons placed further out to further inform motorists of the upcoming crosswalk. Okay. Those would likely be the flashing, like they slowly flash yellow, whereas the ones at the crosswalk rapidly flash yellow, if that makes sense.
Sure. Do they, when they flash slowly, is that all the time, or is that in response to knowing that there's a need?
Likely, I believe we would recommend the ones that flash slowly all the time. There are other ones that you see them more at like traffic signals that have poor sight distance. They'll say red signal ahead when it's activated, and then it goes kind of blank when it's not when it's a green signal. But we would just use the current appropriate MUTCD compliant devices.
And last question is the maintenance of it, is that part of the 25K fund, or is that DPW would be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of these devices or facilities?
Yeah, it's a good question. Since it will be in the public right of way, that will then be the responsibility of the DPW, which is why the full engineering and design of it and construction of it would be done by the applicant, but in coordination with the DPW. So it'd go through DPW review and approval. It's a much more significant cost what the applicant is now proposing for mitigation than the one-time monetary 25,000 contribution. So,
yeah. So we'll have a condition requiring successful coordination with DPW. I don't think there's any sidewalk. I'm pretty confident there's no sidewalk on the far side of Route 30. And I don't think there's much in the way of a sidewalk on your side of Route 30. Something you said made me think that part of this is to have some sort of a waiting pad or area for people to stand.
That's correct, yes. It would be kind of an abbreviated sidewalk. It would be long enough to meet industry standards for a pedestrian, what we call a pedestrian refuge area, which means that the pedestrians can safely be separated from vehicles traveling on Route 30 while they wait for the shuttle bus.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to picture. I don't know that I've ever seen the WRTA bus or how the buses run, except maybe up in the city itself. But this is like a flag it down kind of a stop?
Yes, so Tetra Tech and the applicant met with the WRTA and CMRPC representatives to specifically discuss their shuttle service, and they indicated that there's adequate capacity to support the employees here, as well as it confirming that it's a flag down service.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, it wouldn't go into the site, which is why the applicant is committed to doing
But it wouldn't be, since you're not at one of our stops, we just go right on past you. That, if you're at their place and you.
Yes.
There used to be signs that said bus stop, and you'd stand by the bus stop sign, like when I went rode buses and when I was a kid.
No, that's what I'm more familiar with, particularly in college when I went to school at UMass Lowell. So we actually asked the WRTA about that, and they said they don't normally do that with fixed route service that operates on flag downs operation. However, they said they'd be very willing to work with the town if that was their desire to install a sign.
So that's in the conditions too. We require a successful working out. Okay. Anything else from you, from you? What do we need to do?
Dan might want to speak to some of the comments that Courtney made. Dan Dumais from MDM is on. He might want to elaborate or provide some feedback.
Feedback?
Good evening, Dan Dumais, Senior Project Manager with MDM. We did the peer review on this. So if you want to pull up Exhibit 49, Sheet 14, that'll kind of show where this crosswalk is, and it'll show those ramp panels. So you can identify those, but so this one exhibit, that exhibit is fine right there. So if you zoom in on the crosswalk of the driveway a little bit, it'd be great. There you go. So what they're saying is there's going to be a sidewalk coming up the left-hand side, the western side of the driveway. It's going to go, and there's going to be a waiting area and a ramp panel that's going to cross with a ADA compliant ramps, marked crosswalk across the Westboro Road. There's going to be a ramp on the other side and then a waiting area. So that's what they're looking at. And then there's going to be at the back of the panels, ADA compliant, there's going to be the signs for the pedestrian crossings that are going to include push buttons that would activate rectangular rapid flashing beacons at the intersection like Courtney had described. Generally in advance of the intersection, probably back a couple hundred feet where the end of those pink lines are, you're going to usually have advanced intersection warning signs. So you're telling people driving down the road that you have a crosswalk coming up ahead. So as part of this design, they're going to make those actually flash as well. There's two different ways to do them. Like Courtney said, you can put in and they can slowly flash so that you know that there's a crosswalk there all the time. Or you can actually set them up so when you push the push button, they would activate and they would only blink when somebody's crossing the road. So we're going to work with the town and the DPW to make sure that they're happy with the design and make sure it's METCD compliant for whatever they end up going with there. So we're happy with that as well. As you can see from this particular diagram as well, one of our big concerns was the driveway overlap for large vehicles, articulated trucks. So we worked with Tetra Tech and Bowler to come up with a design and really widen the throw area to provide larger corner radii in a center. In this case, it ended up being a scored concrete island. So if you go to sheet 16, this would be for the largest WB67 making a left turn in. So you can see when it now goes into the site, it would no longer have to go on the incorrect side of the road. So the people leaving the site, there'd be no more conflicts there. So that's what this one shows. If you go to the 17, it would be a right turn out. So they can use that scored concrete area again to make a right turn out, and it'd be not in conflict with the vehicle coming into the site. And then the sheet 18 is the last one, be a right turn coming into the site from the west. Again, not encroaching into that egress lane from the site. So this is a huge improvement, and we also work with Bowler and Tetra Tech to put some striping on that road on the corners to really tighten it up for passenger cars, but then allow for these larger vehicles to have adequate area to maneuver into the site. So that was a huge benefit to the updated plan that you're now seeing before you that Bowler created. They did address all of our comments, and there's several we had recommended conditions for a traffic demand management plan, some items to include there, as well as a monitoring program. And working with the DPW on coming up with a maintenance plan for the selective clearing, which was approved by your Conservation Commission, to make sure that the sight lines, not only for the crosswalk, but for the driveway itself, in terms of exiting the site, can be not only cleared, but can be maintained in the future on a regular basis. So that's about it. I think they've addressed all our issues, like was previously said, and with some pretty minor conditions that are pretty standard with some TDM, these improvements for the crosswalks, as well as some monitoring program with some thresholds of when additional items may be needed if they went over a certain threshold. They satisfied all the traffic issues. Thank you.
Dan, I just had a question. The board
Sure.
should probably come to a consensus this evening about what specifically they would like to see in the TDM program, right?
Correct.
Or is it more of a standard condition that
So I believe the additional items that we had recommended, one was a secure weather protected bike parking, which I believe has been added to the plans. Transportation manual that's pretty easy to give out to employees and of the site. And we also recommended a fare subsidy for the MBTA for passes. This would be for eligible employees and tenants, pre-tax deductions for tenants that actually use that service. So our recommendation, they wouldn't give that to everybody. It would be somebody who says, I use the T regularly. That's my main way to get to and from work. And for those eligible employees, they would pay for a fare subsidy for them. Those are the big additions that we added. I don't think it's anything major, but that's for the board to weigh in if they want to add those on or not. In terms of the monitoring program, I think we've all agreed to the monitoring with the counts from 5 to 9 a.m., 4 to 7 p.m. We had recommended 6 months after initial occupancy so that any bugs can be worked out. So you're figured out that they're generating a higher demand right off the bat. Within 6 months, you'll know about it, and it's not a lingering problem. If the facility is not 100% open, then we recommend you monitor again about 6 months after the final occupancy as well. And then we're looking at the monitoring threshold for the site would be 20% increase above what Tetra Tech had estimated for the site based on industry standards for general light industrial building. And then if they're over that 20%, they'd have to come back with either mitigation measures for offsite improvements if they had any impact on them, or maybe come up with additional TDM measures or other items that they could reduce the traffic back to what they had been approved for.
Thank you.
I had one question.
Yeah.
So, if I remember correctly, there is no truck that would come into this facility through Institute Road, right?
Correct. That that driveway would be restricted to all non-truck activity. It has been designed to accommodate emergency vehicle access, but as far as the tenant goes, it would just be the worker, the vehicles.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, we definitely appreciate MDM's comments, but there's just a couple of items that Haley might want to speak to that we were hoping to modify. One was the request to include in the TDM program a fare subsidy. The applicant will not be the tenant. They will be leasing, so they'll be significantly restricted in what they can enforce. So they wanted to waive that one, which is also why they were willing to offer up the enhanced mitigation for the crosswalk. And then the other item was the monitoring. Since they don't have a specific tenant lined up, we were hoping to, one, limit it to the site driveways only, rather than if it, I think MDM had indicated if it was a 20% increase in trips that they would then have to study the other study area intersections. But since there's other developments that could be contributing to traffic increases at those other intersections, it would really be hard to tie any change at those locations. But they would be willing, if there was a 20% or more increase in trips at their site driveways, to incorporate additional TDM measures. And if we could limit it to one program, whether that's just the initial 6 months after initial occupancy, or Haley, I don't know if you want to weigh in, if there's, you want to cap it at a year. It's just to do 2 monitoring programs and try to figure out what the different tenancy may be a bit onerous on the applicant.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, I guess my initial reaction was, oh shoot, they want us to pay for these 2 traffic monitoring studies, maybe right after each other. But then I see why MDM made the suggestion, just to kind of be able to react to any immediate actions. So I think we can commit, if the board wants to have both the initial 6 months and then after the full occupancy. But as Courtney suggested, we would request that it be limited to our site driveway.
Haley, just a quick question. So the timeline is as proposed is okay with you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I see why so just so I understand correctly, 6 months after the initial occupancy. So if, for example, a tenant took the first building, we built the first building and it was fully leased, there would be a second warehouse that wasn't fully occupied. So we would come back and do another monitoring program after it was fully occupied. I guess my question was just, if we build the first building and it's only half leased, do we do the study that, you see what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know what's the threshold to conduct the studies. Maybe Dan, if you wouldn't mind.
So what I would recommend is you don't know who you're going to occupy first. It could be one building, it could be half building, part of a building. So I would say after 6 months of initial occupancy, if that's half the building, one building, or whatever, then you do the monitoring. If it's not, we'd say it's pretty much full occupancy, about 80%.
Okay.
So the next threshold after your first initial occupancy would be about 80% occupancy, and then 6 months after that. That way, when you get that first tenant in there, you're probably going after similar type tenants. So you're going to know right off the bat, all right, that first one is really low or it's really high. It'll give you a sense of what other type of tenants you can go at, but then kind of where your thresholds and how this thing is actually building out versus what you projected. So I would say it's at 6 months after initial, that any occupancy, and then the second one you wouldn't have to do until you hit the 80% threshold. So you wouldn't have to do 6 different iterations; it would just be the 2. And if it makes it easier, your initial one could be the ATRs and the turning movement counts at the driveways. And then if you're not exceeding those thresholds, then you're not up for any additional improvements at the other intersections anyway. So you might be able to do is if you go over that threshold, then you have to expand it. In terms of from Tetra Tech's side, it's usually easier to do the monitoring if you collect the data at the same time. That way you can, if you know you're over, you can react and say, oh, there's a problem, there's no problem. There might not actually be a problem over 20%, but that's kind of the threshold that would initiate further review.
Everybody okay about all that? We know what we're gonna do on all that.
If I could clarify one other TDM item, the bike racks are not covered. They're just U-bollard style bike racks. The bicycle racks at the 2 buildings are not enclosed bicycle. They're just straight bike racks, U-bollard style bike racks.
I just had one little one. This crosswalk and landing pads or what have you for thinking about the bus stop, be really nice if the residences and the businesses that are coming in across the street could take advantage of it. It looks to me like it's a little too far away to be trying to go along Institute very far or along Route 30. It's still like, it's gonna be a good many people there. Maybe, is it okay for them to go in your Institute Road and walk around out to the sidewalk?
I don't think we can speak to that directly since it's private property. I don't think they can encourage that. But what I would like to say is that this mitigation being offered now is significantly more than what the applicant was previously offering.
But that's fine. Now that it's good mitigation and you can get a bus stop, you got hundreds of people and businesses that would be better. We're building up quite an active area here. Between this and around on Pine Street and all through Centec. So being able to get more public transportation.
Of course. So the shuttle bus passes through there already. So it goes between the MBTA station on Pine Street and goes on Route 30 past the site and then continues.
Right.
So in its flag down service, so you don't need a dedicated spot. So that's independent of this project.
I think
No, the independent spot doesn't have a light and a marked crosswalk and a place to stand and so on. So.
On that same kind of line of thought, but slightly different. You said this is, doing this crosswalk, doing this, landing is significantly more than what was initially proposed, which was the 25,000 proposal. In our draft decision, we, it might be putting the cart before the horse a little bit on this, point, but question, but we have, the $25,000 donation or building, these pieces. You're saying it's significantly more, just so I like having that or in case there's some sort of blocker for building this, but you're saying it's significantly more to make us in favor of not doing some of these other, suggestions. So what number are you imagining that would be? And it's kind of what I'm thinking about here.
So the reason I say it's significantly more is, well, one, we haven't done a cost estimate for it. But one of the reasons it's significantly more is that doing a one-time monetary contribution, while it is very common and many communities do appreciate it, then that puts the responsibility on the agency having jurisdiction to design, construct. So the applicant, what they've changed is instead of putting that responsibility on the town, they're now committed to funding the design and construction of this improvement. And so that's why it's significantly more. And Haley, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's exactly right, Courtney. And it was also, I think Dan could concur with this, right? In MDM's peer review, they suggested instead of a contribution amount that we should point to a specific improvement that would benefit the town. So that's why we undertook the design and engineering of this commitment, because it's actually something that will come to fruition and be connected to our conditions of approval.
Yeah, that's correct. MDM had recommended that instead of the 25,000 that you can get a little more for your buck on this one, where they're going to design it, they're going to build it. You're going to have an appropriate crossing location that not only promotes bus use for this site, but is also consistent with the long range goals of providing a sidewalk section by the town or others as developments are approved in this corridor along Westboro Road connecting to the train station down at Pine Street. So just the RFBs alone are probably in the $20,000 range. This is an estimate. So then building the sidewalks and all that other stuff is, I would agree, we don't have a cost estimate, but it's likely to be more than 25.
Okay. Do we have anything more we need to talk about? What do we want to do?
I mean, we have a lengthy permit, but I mean, I think if we go through any, I think I believe that the board had a chance to review it in advance, as did the applicant, and we can talk through what tweaks need to be made. I mean, ideally, I think we would like to try and come to consensus this evening, and if there's something that we can't, then we can obviously talk about that. But I mean, I don't think that there's, for my opinion, planning department's opinion, there's nothing, I don't think absurd. I mean, the applicant can probably say, you know, if there's some things that need to be tweaked, hopefully nothing major, because it was really all based on the testimony that we've been receiving in the record.
So is there anything we need to talk about before we start going through the draft decision?
No.
Is there anything, well, do you want to go through the draft decision before you close the hearing?
If there is no more information that we need to receive, we could consider closing the hearing.
So, and Haley, jump in if you want to, but I think we'd like the opportunity, there's a couple of items that we would like to clarify. One of them was the thing that we just talked about, the making these specific improvements in lieu of the 25, because there's a number of instances within the decision that reference that, which I think we now have enough direction there. There's a couple of other.
That's a couple of points I had to, as I was going through the draft decision, there was those were a couple of points that I had noted.
On that one point, I generally like a little bit of flexibility in like adding the or X dollar amount contribution instead. Am I understanding that as the applicant, you prefer just to not have the dollar amount be in the conditions and just make the improvement? Okay.
Correct, Haley? We want to tie it to specifically what we're proposing.
All right, so you're committing to the crosswalk improvement, basically. That's what you're willing to commit to.
I am willing to do either. I think it was based on the town's peer review, a suggestion to point to a specific improvement. So if that's what the board agrees is correct, then yes, I would like to take the or out of it, just so we have clear direction from a decision standpoint of what we need to be able to be prepared to do. I'm fine if it's even up to me, which it's not. Whatever you guys decide, we are willing to do. We just want to make it definite. We would request that it be, take the or out of it.
If it was just a donation, what limits on how it could be used would there be?
I mean,
okay, we don't. Okay,
kind of hard to. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm happier with the proposal that was
knowing where it's going.
Knowing where it's going, and
okay. How do we proceed? Do we close the hearing? Do we go through? We're not gonna.
So the future is the rest of the conversation for this evening is going to be specifically related to the draft decision and reworking that, and there's no new testimony or information being received, then yeah, you can definitely go ahead and close the hearing.
And I think if there's just a couple more points we'd like to just iron out while we're here so that there's not ambiguity. If you are going to close, we can at least have the direction between, and I assume that even if it's closed, we have the ability to clarify some items that are in the decision.
Not if we vote on it tonight.
Right. So in that case, there's probably a desire, and Haley, correct me if I'm wrong, but to keep it open.
All right.
There's a number of technical items that are just like some of the.
Shall we talk about keep it open?
Okay.
You folks get all the bugs worked out, so that we have a decision.
I'm sorry.
Talk about.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Chair. I was just going to make a suggestion because I've done this in other communities, that we can close the public hearing if there's not going to be any new testimony and then deliberate on the draft decisions, which I think is what Fiona is suggesting.
I mean, if it's going to be a significant tweaking, then
I
guess
the difference between closing and not closing is if it's just minor clarification, points that we can do, that's fine with hearing closed. If it's, new information having to be received, new knowledge, that's not.
Right.
Okay.
Is it
then I would request that we keep the public hearing open while we can work through some of our questions and clarifications on the draft decision.
Okay, so where would you like me to have the draft pulled up here?
Was that a question for me, Fiona, or for the board?
Yeah, Haley or Josh, wherever you'd like to start
Oh yeah,
talking
sure.
about.
So I think and Josh, feel free to jump in here with me. Just minor Scrivener's errors.
Offline.
I don't know what you're saying.
Sorry, did Bob not say that you guys take it offline and work this out?
I was envisioning that.
Oh, okay. I
perfect.
wasn't sure if it was okay if you wanted to do it this evening or not.
Because I
Sorry.
don't, that doesn't,
Okay.
if there's nothing keeping us from doing that, there's nothing that we have to deal with. Has to continue to the next meeting. You guys smooth it out. If there's anything that we have to decide, we'll just, structure it so we can decide
Okay.
on the 11th, presumably the 11th. And then we can all go home tonight.
Would you include in that any comments from board members on the draft decision to be passed on to you as part of
Revisions.
reworking it?
Yeah. I'll incorporate that.
I have a number of little things that I saw.
Sure. Yeah.
If the board's not going to discuss the decision tonight, then I will forward my comments to you.
Okay.
I think that'll be my sense of the way this is going to work. Or make it happen.
And
So we'll do the same. We'll get our comments to
Okay.
Fiona.
Is there anything more now before you request a continuation to the 11th?
I think the biggest question for me is there anything that you, Fiona, or you folks feel you need input from our board to make this work, just as a high level kind of input that we need to talk about? Or
Haley, there might be one thing that's kind of high level, as you had mentioned, as it relates to commitments that can be made for specific tenants. I think that we can craft some language that's a little bit looser in terms of coming up with reasonable efforts to get the tenants to do those good neighborly
Okay.
things, just because, as Haley had indicated with some of the other measures, it's difficult for them as landlords to be able to dictate what
That's something that came to my mind when I was reading through that. That's the way it's worded in the draft decision. I think I know what we're getting at, but exactly how we make that happen, the way it's worded in the draft decision could be improved.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I could just add to that, Josh, because that's correct. I just want to clarify that it's every intention that we comply with the good neighbor commitments that I put forth in front of the board, right? That's why I did it. We obviously must comply with all local, federal, state laws, and our tenants must. The way that the language is worded right now, I would like the burden to be put on the landlords, us as the property owners, versus on our tenants, right? So we can deal with our tenants in the lease document, but as far as complying with the approvals and the conditions of the approval, I would like that to be on the landlord. And as Josh mentioned, if this is in the conditions, we must comply. I think that have to refile this every year for the foreseeable future, kind of with no end date, scares me a little bit, just because it's an administrative exercise that I wouldn't want us to miss. And that, like I said, if the building inspector walks onto the site and sees that we're not complying with these things, then yes, it's an issue. But wanted to see if you guys would be open to maybe amending that language a bit. It seems a little tight.
Do we need to do anything about that now?
I can speak to myself in just that the overall intent of having it be the landlord's, purview pieces is, you know, a reasonable, you know, endeavor, and I think that I'm happy with staff to kind of work with you guys and figure out what makes sense from that standpoint, and we can discuss that at the decision time.
Great.
So for my own sanity, if any comments should just be sent directly to me, and I'm happy to upload them on the project page, but just make sure that you get them into me, and I'll incorporate them myself, and I'll make sure to have the appropriate notations, etc. I just want to make sure that Dave, and you're going to be sending me something, Josh, you are, Haley, probably
We'll do consolidated. The
Oh, okay,
applicant will
great.
do consolidated.
Yeah, as much as possible. That'd
Yeah.
be great, because then it's easier to turn those around. So
Yeah, and that's one thing that we as board members can't
Correct.
collaborate.
You can.
We,
They can.
each of us that has comments have to send them to you directly.
Yes.
Individually.
yes, I think that would be helpful. It's my only request. So thank you.
Is everybody happy yet?
Good for me.
I believe we were working towards a continuation of the hearing.
Requests.
So I will, if there's nothing more, I will move that the board grant the applicant's about to be received written request to continue this hearing to Monday, December 11th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now then,
Thank you.
are there any other items which may lawfully come before us?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Not debatable? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Really good to see you. You're looking